I've just spent the past 9 months in a gaining phase and gained over 10 kilos. But not all of that was muscle, and it's never going to be if you are a natural lifter. So in this video today, I'm going to explain how much muscle I gained over the 9 months. But I'm also going to come to the part which I see most guys skip before even starting a gaining phase. And it's the reason they end up having to stop after a couple of months because they've gained too much weight and feel a bit too heavy or fat. But before I get into that, let me show you the full journey. So this photo here, this was me last February when I decided I wanted to build some muscle and start a gaining phase. This was me in April last year after doing a quick mini cut before starting the gaining phase. This is me in March this year as I finished the gaining phase, and this is me now in May after finishing my second cut. And this is just a comparison from February last year to May currently. The photo on the left at the starting point, I was weighing 78 kilos, and the photo on the right, my most recent one, I'm now weighing 77 kilos. I'm almost exactly the same weight, but the two photos look very different. So how much of those 10 kilos I gained over the last year was muscle? If your training and nutrition are set up correctly in a gaining phase, on average, you should be expecting to see a 1-to-1 ratio of fat to muscle gained. So I gained 5 kilos of muscle then? Not quite, because there's also going to be 1 to 3 kilos of water and glycogen gained as well. So realistically, I probably gained somewhere around 3 to 4 kilos over the 9-month period. Now you might be wondering, how can I actually tell that? That's exactly why I performed another fat loss phase after completing the gaining phase. So I could try and get back down to a similar body fat percentage to where I started the diet so I could compare the two. So in these two photos here, I'm roughly around 10 to 12% body fat in both of these images. But on the left, I was weighing 73 kilos, and the photo on the right, the most recent one, I'm weighing 77 kilos. Or if we compare the original starting photo where I weigh 78 kilos, I'm probably somewhere between 15 to 17% body fat here, more closer towards 17. And then the more recent photo of me here, I'm weighing 77 kilos, but 10 to 12% body fat. So I'm a kilo lighter, but significantly leaner. And that's what structured gaining and fat loss phases actually look like, not just weight loss. It's a completely different body composition at almost exactly the same weight, kind of similar to what we'd call like a body recomposition. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the calories I was eating at each stage, how much weight I was trying to gain or lose each week or month, and when and how I decided to stop each phase. I won't go too deep into the actual setup and structure of each of the phases. I'll have them as separate videos on my channel. So let's get into it. The starting point. So this was my starting point. In this photo here, I weighed 78 kilos, somewhere between 15 to 17% body fat, probably more towards that 17%. And you might be asking, so why didn't I just go straight into a gaining phase from here? If I'd have gone straight into a gaining phase at this body fat percentage, I'd have had to stop within a couple of months. Because as I've already mentioned earlier in the video, that when you are in a gaining phase, the weight that you gain is going to be in a 1-to-1 ratio of fat to muscle. So starting at somewhere between 15 to 17% body fat is not going to give me too much long gaining weight until I reach 20% body fat. And 20% body fat is the upper limit of what I would suggest you do a gaining phase to. Because once you start getting above 20% body fat, it's going to take a long time to diet back down to a similar body fat percentage as you were before. And most guys tend to look their best somewhere around 10 to 15% body fat. So if you're considering starting a gaining phase and you're above 15% body fat, then it's not really going to give you a long enough period to do a proper gaining phase. So that's why you're probably better off doing a mini cut or a bit of an extended diet just to get down to 10 to 12% body fat, because this is going to give you a much longer time scale to be able to gain weight without worrying about having to stop too early due to feeling a bit heavy or fat. Okay, so the mini cut. I performed an aggressive deficit. In 7 weeks, I lost 7 kilos and was eating 1,650 calories, which put me in a deficit of around 1,000 calories a day. Now, the reason why I went into such an aggressive deficit, roughly around 1%, is because I just wanted to get the fat off as quick as I could so I could start a gaining phase. I didn't want to be dieting for weeks or months on end when I didn't need to. And it worked great, as you can tell from the photos. However, I actually probably did get below 10% body fat and was probably sitting somewhere more between 7 to 9%, which wasn't intentional, but it still put me in a great place to start my gaining phase from. Now, something that a lot of people tend to miss and is really important once you've finished a gaining phase or a fat loss phase is spending some time at maintenance and not just switching from one to the other. It kind of almost almost acts like a stepping stone between the phases, because going straight from a gaining phase into a diet is going to leave you really hungry, and vice versa. If you go straight from a diet into a gaining phase, it's going to leave you struggling to eat that much food volume. But whereas if we take a short break of somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks at maintenance, it's almost acting as like a halfway point between the two phases and allows you to adjust to your new calorie target. So I spent 2 weeks at maintenance. Now, typically you will tend to see increases of weight from somewhere between 1 to 3 kilos when you do go from a deficit to maintenance. And there's no need to panic from that. It's usually just an increase from glycogen and water retention. However, I didn't see any gaining weight. So I was still at 72 kilos at this point at the end of my 2-week maintenance. And then from here, this is when I started the 9-month gaining phase. So starting the gaining phase in this photo, I was probably somewhere between 7 to 9% body fat, more towards 9%. I set a monthly weight gain target of 1 kilo, and I actually finished slightly above that, gaining on average 1.11 kilos on a monthly basis. Now, this is something really important I should mention when you are doing a gaining phase. Set a monthly weight gain target, not just a weekly one. The real progress is going to show up in the monthly comparison, and a lot of the time, because of the weight you are going to be gaining is going to be so small, it's going to be difficult to tell on week by week check-ins. That's why it's better to go off the monthly check-in so you can see the rate of monthly weight gain. I started the gaining phase at around 2,900 calories and I finished at 3,050 calories. So the calories gradually crept up throughout the gaining phase, but you can see I wasn't going for any crazy target by the end. However, I did have 1 month off in December when I was away in Australia and also over the Christmas break as well. Now, I decided in March that I was going to stop the gaining phase, and I decided to stop around 15% body fat as opposed to 20%. And there's a few reasons for that. And the first one is I felt like I'd already gained quite a bit of fat at this point. Not to a point where it was uncomfortable, but I knew that in the summer I've got 2 holidays coming up that I wanted to be in great shape for. And if I was going to get up to 20% body fat, it was going to take a long time from this point still. And then not only that, when I did get up to 20% body fat, after I've done a long gaining phase, the last thing you want to do is risk losing any muscle mass you've just worked so hard to build. Therefore, the diet is not going to be a quick mini cut, but instead it's going to be a longer, slower rate of weight loss over a long period of time. So if I got up to 20% body fat, that's a lot of weight to then lose on the back end of the gaining phase. So I decided to stop it at 15% and then just go into a slow rate of weight loss for my holidays. So the gaining phase lasted around 9 months, and in that time I gained 10 kilos and went from somewhere between 7 to 9% body fat, probably more towards 9%, and then finished around 15% body fat. And I finished intentionally 12 weeks out away from my first holiday to Bali, as I then took 2 weeks at maintenance after finishing the gaining phase before going into the fat loss phase. And then I started my 10-week fat loss phase for Bali. So I started the fat loss phase at 82.6 kilos. My plan was to diet for around 10 weeks, losing 400 grams each week. And I was eating on average 2,200 calories. But how I broke that up is I did 5 days at 2,000 calories and then 2 days at 2,700 calories each day. But I ended up getting 7 weeks into the diet and had already lost 5.7 kilos and then hit 10 to 12% body fat. I actually probably hit 10 to 12% at week 6, but wanted to just give it 1 more week to be certain. So I was actually losing around 800 grams per week, not 400, which wasn't intentional, especially after doing a 9-month gaining phase. So I could have actually probably been dieting on 2,400 calories, losing the 400 grams per week, as opposed to being on 2,200 and losing 800 grams per week, or even a little bit higher. I'd have to work it out. But the good news for me is the next time I do decide to do a slower fat loss phase, then I can diet on higher calories. So why did I stop the diet early, and why did I not continue to push and try maybe get below 10 to 12% body fat? Well, because I'd hit my goal of hitting 10 to 12% body fat. But secondly, once you get below 10% as a natural lifter, things just start to suck. You're gonna have lower energy, training performance is gonna decrease, libido starts to disappear, sleep gets affected. There's just no need. Not unless obviously you're stepping on stage or doing a photo shoot. most guys are going to look the best somewhere between 10 to 12% body fat. And these are exact numbers. Everybody's going to look better at certain different body fat percentages. You don't have to hit a certain goal, but it's just always good to have something to aim towards. So once I was comfortably sitting between 10 to 12% body fat, that's when I decided to stop the diet 3 weeks early. And once I stopped the diet, I didn't reverse diet. So I've already made a previous video on this on why you shouldn't reverse diet, but I've just gone straight back to maintenance calories. And so this is the result. I've gained around 3 to 4 kilos of muscle over the past 9 months, which for a natural lifter who's been training for years, this is actually pretty decent. And how can I tell? Well, the photo on the left, I weigh 72 kilograms, and after completing my most recent diet, I weigh 76.75 kilos. I'm probably slightly leaner in the photo on the left than the one on the right, but at a similar body fat percentage. So overall, I'm really pleased with how this gaining phase has gone. However, one change I am going to make when I start my next gaining phase, which will be in a couple months' time after I've had my holidays to Bali and Croatia, is that this time I'm going to go at a slower rate of weight gain. And this is because my training age has probably increased over the last year. So I'm going to look to gain around 0.5 to potentially 0.75% of body weight on a monthly basis, just to try and keep the fat gain even more minimal this time around. So that's just over a year of fat loss and gaining phases documented. And hopefully it's giving you a bit more of an insight into what a structured bulk and cut actually looks like. Now, if you're not sure whether you should be starting a gaining or a fat loss phase first, I've built a free quiz that will tell you within less than 60 seconds based upon your body fat percentage, training age, and a few other factors. If you want to take the quiz, then just click the link in the description or I'll pin it to the top comment as well. I would definitely recommend it before you start doing a gaining phase or a fat loss phase, just to make sure you're choosing the right one. And finally, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe as I post these weekly.